Great, isn't it? Everybody's staying around. Thank you so much for staying. I'd like to tell you a little bit about connecting digital and physical networks. It actually happens to be the central theme behind the fund that I run called Moment Ventures. And so hopefully what I'd like to do is give you an overview of what we're trying to do and the kind of things we're looking for. And hopefully that will help answer some of the questions about perhaps the unique way we're looking at the tech world from a venture perspective today. So just a quick overview on Moment Ventures. We are an early stage venture capital firm. We're based in Palo Alto. We actually, our origin, we're about a year and a half old, and our origin came from the confluence of my and my partner Amar Hanafi's background as VCs at other firms. We came together to create Moment specifically because of an opportunity that we saw in a space that we call the infrastructure of everything. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll have a better idea of what I mean by that. But we're essentially an early stage investor. We make initial investments at seed primarily, but also in Series A stage rounds. And one of the things we like to do, because we also got our start as entrepreneurs before we got into venture, and so we have had the opportunity to go through some of perhaps the experiences that you're all going through if you're doing a startup currently. So what we like to do is work very closely with our entrepreneurs that we invest in. We think there's a lot of mystique out there about raising money, about VCs in general, about how to win the right kinds of customers. All those things are very, sometimes very difficult to deal with. You have so many hats you have to wear as a founder of a company. So what we like to do is try to be there on your side to help you go through those stages and also connect you up with the larger venture capital firms that will hopefully eventually write you much bigger checks so that you can actually fund your business. So I would classify Moment as a thematic investor. So while we can invest in just about anything that's IT related, the way we look at it, it comes through a certain lens, and that's what I'd like to tell you about. So what is the infrastructure of everything? To us, it is where IT becomes the platform that revolutionizes a new way of doing things. Inserting IT to become the connective tissue, if you will, for an existing marketplace to radically change the way that industry works. It also means creating entirely brand new markets that never existed before, because what we're doing is creating a new type of internet endpoint device that gets deployed into the marketplace, creating a whole new economy leveraging that particular device. And these are just some of the pictures of the types of companies that we like, whether it's in robots, in drones, or in other types of wearables. And also deploying these technologies in specific markets and environments such as education, healthcare, and what have you. So it's a very broad definition of what we're trying to do, but essentially where IT connects all these networks up. So back when I was an entrepreneur, actually when I was doing what you're doing, the IT industry was pretty simple. You know, most of the technologies that we all spent time developing really went into two primary things, computers and phones. And that was essentially the entire market. Happens to be a very big market. In fact, it's a $4 trillion market. And what IT started off as is essentially an overlay on top of the physical world. All we did in the first 25 years of technology, maybe 30 to 45 years of technology, is connect computers and phones and build really great computers and build really great phones and make sure they're all connected. And then those became the new endpoints of what ended up becoming the internet, right? So now we had smartphones in everybody's hands, and you could do all sorts of things that you could never do before. Prior to that, you had computers everywhere, and that became the actual endpoint device that you communicated with anybody else who had a computer or a smartphone. That in and of itself was became a $4 trillion industry. It continues to grow today. It's a massive market today, and we think there's all sorts of continued excitement in this space. Looking forward, however, we're actually at the cusp of something completely different for the world and our societies at large. And what's happening now is it's gotten a little more complicated. We're not talking about just computers and phones anymore. Now we're talking about entirely new categories of IT-enabled devices. We like to call them new computers. If you think about every one of these devices, it's probably hard to see these pictures on top, whether you're talking about a next generation car or a drone or a 3D printer or a VR head-mounted display. Every one of those is just a different type of computer. A drone is just a computer with wings. But what's interesting and different this time around versus back then is in the first go around, computers and phones had to have all the compute power in the actual endpoint device. That's why all the chip companies and all the systems companies built the greatest phones and the greatest computers using the greatest technology. Now, because of advancements in the cloud and the fact that you can have distributed compute across not just the endpoint device, but actually through the cloud and through, you can distribute it in different places, those endpoint devices don't need to be as complex as one might think, right? We don't need to put every single piece of functionality into a sensor that is measuring, the fullness of a trash bin, for example, right? We can actually just have a very simple sensor where most of the compute is actually done in the cloud. So that's really interesting because it changes everything about how startups capitalize to fund their business, right? Because if you don't have to, if you're building a new platform that leverages a new type of device, and you don't have to actually fund the creation of hundreds of thousands of expensive devices, that means you can raise a lot less money to fund your company. You can put all of your innovation in the cloud. And now instead of raising $10, $20, $50 million to get out of the gates, you can do it on an order of magnitude less amount of capital. So we think that's great for you. We also think that's great for us because we don't have to risk as much capital to help you in making that venture happen. So in the early days, you can leverage the fact that sensors continue to get cheaper. We're finding ways to integrate seamless payment infrastructures into these devices. Everybody's connected. There's smartphones everywhere. There's smart devices everywhere. And there's cheap processing power and cheap cloud resources available such that every one of these categories can now become a massive market as a result. But it's very complicated. I think we as an industry, I believe, we sort of made a mistake when we first got going. Everybody came out of the gates and anointed this next generation market as IoT. And IoT is going to be this fantastic 100 billion device market. And the problem with IoT is IoT isn't anything. It's just a word that everybody uses to describe all the things that you can't describe. Right? I mean, if I wanted to describe a connected car, why don't I just call it a car? If I want to describe a drone that I'm flying for surveillance, why don't I just call it a drone? IoT in and of itself, I think, did a disservice to the industry because IoT doesn't mean anything. It doesn't solve anyone's problem. The big difference between the last go-around and this go-around is the last go-around, innovation started from, what I like to say, it started from the inside and came out. It used to be that innovation all came from originally the semiconductor providers, right? Everybody would wait for Intel to create the next great processor that had a list of features that were, record-breaking and allowed you to do things you could never do before. And you, as the customer, had the responsibility of surrounding that microprocessor with sheet metal and a bunch of inputs and outputs and connect them up with wires, and all of a sudden that's your product, right? The innovation started in the core, and then you build products because of that core capability. In today's world, in the world of IoT, in all honesty, nobody cares what's in that device, right? Just solve my problem, right? If I'm trying to revolutionize the way telemedicine works, and I need to connect doctors with patients over an IT-connected network, I really don't care what's in that, display device. I really don't care how that's being done. Just solve my problem. And I think that's the opportunity for today's entrepreneur going forward, because if you can take a combination of all these different components and create a solution, that's a lot easier to sell to the customer who's really just trying to get his problem solved. And so I wish the market would have started this way, which was really, let's leverage compute and IT and the ability to connect different constituents together. And let's use that as a way to create solutions that really solve problems. So that's what we're trying to do, find entrepreneurs that can do that. For Moment Ventures, there's 3 different types of infrastructure of everything companies that we look for. The first is what we call innovations in the IT ecosystem. And what we mean by that is just traditional resources such as networking and storage, and security, and application monitoring, and all those different traditional devices that were all billion-dollar markets the last go around are still billion-dollar markets today and growing. So we think there continues to be interesting innovations in and around that space. Perhaps more interesting and more relevant to maybe what you're thinking about today is the second category, something we call new device ecosystems. So what we try to do here is we try to look for ways in which we can create new markets because of a new connected device. So rather than shove a smart light bulb at me, where I now have to decide whether it's worth $40 versus $2, solve my problem. Maybe I'm trying to manage power inside a building, and now you've created a software platform that allows you to monitor and manage the power management throughout the building. And oh, by the way, you need to install these light bulbs as a result of that. And it's a $40,000 solution as opposed to trying to sell a per light bulb product in the marketplace. So that's one way of doing it. So what we look for is we look for new devices, and we look for ways to create markets out of them, whether it's drones or cars or things we haven't even heard about yet. The third type of company we're looking for is something we call people-based platforms. When we can take 2 different disparate groups of people and we connect them together with IT, it's amazing. We can actually build economies on top of that interconnection. So probably the most trite example would be something like Uber. Uber is a software company that has built transportation infrastructure to connect people who need rides with people who have cars. That's a simple value proposition, but it's a massively valued company as a result of it. They didn't have to build any cars, and they didn't have to build any hardware to make that company happen. So what we've done is we've gone ahead and looked at other industries where the similar dynamic can take place. We look for, in fact, old school industries where business is being done in a certain archaic way. And we try to see, can IT come in and disrupt it in a way to revolutionize the way that industry does business. I'm going to give you some examples of companies that we're involved with in the hopes of making these pictures a little clearer for you. But 3 different types of companies: IT, new device ecosystems, people-based platforms. So just to give you an idea of some of the companies that we're involved with, and again, these are just examples of companies we're involved with. So we have an investment, for example, in a company here in San Jose called Savioke, which is a robot infrastructure company. Savioke makes what we call service robots. They get deployed in hotels initially as room service robots. Essentially, if you go to the Aloft in Cupertino next to Apple, you'll see the Savioke robot at work. Essentially, this device, which looks a little bit like R2-D2 from Star Wars, is essentially an autonomous vehicle that gets dispatched from the front desk of a hotel and actually autonomously navigates its way through the hotel. It autonomously calls the elevator and finds its way. It's pre-programmed to know where every room is, and actually gets to the room. There's a hatch on top of the robot that's secure. You can put whatever it is you're asking for if you call room service, or a toothbrush, or a newspaper, or some food, or what have you. And once it arrives at your front door, there's a LiDAR sensor there. It actually calls your phone in the room. You answer the phone, it tells you that the delivery's there. You open the door, the LiDAR sensor knows that the door opened. It has the box, opens up, you take your device, and then there's a little keypad on the top that allows you to enter in, you know, a job well done, or you can make a review and what have you. And then it goes back to the front desk, plugs itself back into the charging station. That entire transaction takes 4 minutes. Currently, if you arrive at your hotel at 2 in the morning, you just dropped your bags in your room, you forgot your toothbrush, it might take 45 minutes or maybe even an hour for the person at the front desk to come and deliver something to you because they're busy, right? And so this is a way in which, in this case, the hotel has a way to efficiently satisfy customers' needs. What's really fascinating about this company is that at the hotels that they've been working with, they've noticed that the travel ratings of their hotel go way up whenever there's a robot on staff. And so what looks like a productivity tool is actually a customer enlightenment tool. And the other nice thing about this product is that the hotel doesn't actually have to buy the robot, they just rent the robot. And the robot is sold as a monthly service, and the hotel can subscribe to it. Now, why is that interesting to us? It sounds like a robot, and that sounds like a lot of hardware. What's interesting about Savioke is Savioke actually, the real magic that they've developed is the software that allows the robot to navigate the hotel environment amongst humans, right? It actually knows if you're in the way, it will actually go around you and make its way through the hotel. What's interesting about Savioke is they're now in the process of deploying into other environments like hospitals and companies, factories, logistics operations, where now they're actually using the software they developed for hotels and now deploying it in these other markets in a really efficient way. So at the end of the day, what they're building is sort of a robot platform that can be used in a multitude of logistics environments. Any questions so far?
Oh, actually, I have a question.
Sure.
So I think delivery is probably the main functionality of this robot.
Currently, it's for delivery, yes. So some of the new applications that are now being used are for things like inside a factory, if I need to get parts from this place over there. Right now, if a person actually has to do that, if it's a new type of delivery every single time, it gets to be very complex because now you actually have to have a person full time running around delivering things to from a multitude of points to another multitude of points. So what Savioke is able to do is actually autonomously navigate that at significantly lower cost. We also have an investment in a company called Skyward. Skyward is a company that's in the drone flight management space. So this is a company that's very key in the drone space, but they don't make drones. What they do is they build a software platform in the cloud that allows enterprises that fly drones to basically log all their flights, secure all their flights, make sure that pilots are certified, know how to fly these things, make sure they can get insurance to get coverage. They keep a digital track record of everywhere the drone flies so that you have a digital footprint in case somebody ever makes a claim that your drone is this or that. You actually have a full digital history on where your drones are going and where they fly. It also allows you to run what we call a drone fleet, right? Because if you're a business running an insurance company, for example, using drones, you wouldn't have one drone, you would have a fleet of drones that could be dispatched on any number of jobs. So how do you manage the pilot to drone to task matrix, if you will? So Skyward is a software platform that helps you manage that. Actually, we're happy to have reported just 2 weeks ago that they were acquired by Verizon, and Verizon is incorporating Skyward into their fleet logistics operations for IoT. And here's a different type of company that may resonate with all of you, especially if you have kids. A company, it's a people-based platform company called Swing Education. Swing is a marketplace for substitute teachers. Every single day, At every school across the country, around 6 o'clock in the morning, some person gets a mad frantic call of some unknown number of substitutes that are needed for their school that day. And they are on a mad scramble to find substitutes to show up in an hour to the classroom. Otherwise, the principal sits in the class that day, and it's not good for anyone, especially your kids. So it's a very old school industry. There's $4.6 billion spent every year finding substitutes. And they use voicemail and Rolodex cards, and every school has maybe 2 or 3 teachers that they know about that can substitute. If you can't get a hold of them, it's a very inefficient transaction. What Swing does is Swing brings IT into this network, and now they have a platform that allows substitutes to claim open sub-positions by text. So the schools post available positions in advance or last minute. And then substitutes that are on the network can see that on their phone, and if they see an opportunity or opening that they're interested in, they can just claim it. And then they show up. This is all done in a cost-neutral fashion to the schools. What's nice about this is that the schools are already budgeted to spend money on subs, so there's no regimented process to have to go and get approval to do this. They can do this. Swing's a fast-growing company that we're excited to be a part of. We were the lead in the seed round with them. But again, this is a company that's in education, but it's an IT company that actually connects schools with stuff. That's why it's a very different type of infrastructure, if you will. Now I have one more to talk about. This is one of our funner, crazier companies, but it's a company called Worldview. Worldview built an entirely new type of internet endpoint device, which is called a Stratolite. A Stratolite is essentially a high-altitude balloon that gets lifted into the stratosphere. Why would one want to do that? Well, when you're at the stratosphere, you're not quite in space yet. And so you can actually see the curvature of the Earth at that point, and you get a unique perspective of the globe that you otherwise would not be able to do unless you launch rockets for satellites, which are highly risky and very, very expensive. And so Worldview is a company that actually sort of serves the void between, above the level of what drones can do and below the level of what you would want to spend money for space. And there's a number of applications that are being enabled because of this. The company actually got started a few years ago when you may remember a Google executive named Alan Eustace broke the world record for high altitude jump. You might remember the Red Bull guy, Felix Baumgartner, who broke the original record for a high jump, and then Alan actually broke his record. He basically actually was the seed money, if you will. He actually paid the people at Worldview to get him up there. And then once they got him up there, he jumped and safely landed. There's a great TED Talk on Alan's journey. But anyway, that was the original genesis of this company. The company's based in Tucson, Arizona. It's basically building a new category of device that now can enable and unleash a whole new set of applications that were previously either not affordable or not feasible whatsoever. And now we have probably read about some companies that are interested in putting internet infrastructure up in the stratosphere so that we can beam internet connectivity to third world countries. Or we have a military interested in creating instant networks in remote areas so that ground forces perhaps can communicate over secure remote network that is private and not available to others. Or it might actually be people who are in the weather prediction business or trying to manage what happens with the ice pack and where it's melting and what should they be doing about diverting water from one place to another. So there's just all these new applications that were previously unavailable to us. And so if they're right, they will be creating an entirely new category all by itself. So what's common about all these different companies? The companies are all building their own unique type of infrastructure to connect these new disparate groups with a new technology that makes it much, much more efficient. So I like to say that You know, we love all these big industries that you're reading about. We love the connected car industry, self-driving cars. But I do not want to invest in a car company, right? Love the drone space, but I really didn't want to be involved in a company making drones. And you know, I'd much rather look for the company that's better indexed to the industry at large, a company that can thrive because there's lots of drones out there, or because there's lots of cars out there. And in some cases, these startups actually control the endpoint device themselves, like in Worldview's case. They actually make the balloons. So in that case, they're building a private network, if you will, to connect this category device up. So they can actually build the platform themselves. So hopefully that gives you a picture of what we're talking about. And again, what we're trying to do here is connect essentially digital things with physical things. We think this is a multi-decade, at least, play out of opportunity. There are so many things that we have yet to solve and to build. And because of the fact that we have all these digital resources available to us, whether it's compute, or whether it's connectivity, whether it's cheap sensors, or whether it's commerce that we can conduct, those are all becoming commodity resources. That's great for entrepreneurs who can now incorporate these technologies into solutions that solve customers' problems. So I think